The corporate wing of the Democratic Party doesn't give a shit about people like Matthew here. Matthew works at Trader Joe's. He's deaf and he reads lips. Apparently, he's very good at working with customers, but it's made much more difficult when he has to read lips and people are wearing masks. Matthew Simmons lives in Vancouver, Washington. I know right where that is. I used to live right across the river in Portland, Oregon. When I first started working at Trader Joe's, the obstacles were small, such as learning and improving my lip reading skills with my coworkers and various customers who have not had much experience talking with a deaf person, Matthew Simmons tells Yahoo Lifestyle via email. Over the 2 years, myself along with the crew, coworkers, and our customers, we have enhanced communication by teaching them basic ASL, American Sign Language, signs. Since the coronavirus began, things have changed tremendously. I had been noticing customers and crew members wearing their masks, and that caused me to have some anxiety, Simmons said. As a deaf person, I rely heavily on using my lip reading skills that I have acquired since childhood. The long and short of it is that his employer figured out ways to help him work around these problems, hopefully, that are temporary. But my point, and the point of the Bernie or Bust movement, has been to put workers at the center of what we need to do to fix our society. Most political machinations have had corporations at the center for at least 40 years, and workers like Matthew have had short shrift. Even though our corporate-owned Democrats have been doing a dance to show that they care about regular people, for example, Joe Biden said that he would choose a woman running mate, he now says he won't commit to picking a woman of color for his running mate. He said that women of color will be in his cabinet, but he can't commit to choosing one for vice president. This is just one of many signs that the Clinton, Obama, Biden, DNC, Hollywood, CIA team can't really be expected to put workers first. They can't be expected to put women of color first, or LGBTQ people first, trans people first, students first, women first. And to really help all of those groups, we need to put workers first. The less comfy the workers are, the more we need to focus on helping them. And by helping workers at the bottom of the socioeconomic ladder, we stimulate the economy from the bottom to the top, which is how it always works. Not only is it an act of kindness and compassion to help workers at the bottom of the socioeconomic ladder, it's also a smart move economically. This is a policy framework for mitigating the economic impact of COVID-19. From scholars at the Brookings Institute. COVID-19 is a unique, severe, and unprecedented health and economic crisis that is changing our lives. 3 things make it unique. First, it is a rolling combination of a health pandemic and an economic crisis. Second, the crisis has turned global in record time. Third, it is both a demand and supply side shock to all the major economies. The damage caused by the virus and the policy responses it requires are deep and multifaceted. Its effects can be grouped into 3 categories. Human suffering, the rapid loss of life and deterioration of health outcomes, but increasingly also economic suffering through loss of jobs and other incomes. In a little over 3 months, more than 150,000 people have died and more than 2.1 million have been infected. As small and medium enterprises are hammered by the lockdowns, many workers have lost their jobs or are working on reduced work schedules. If the economic suffering is prolonged and as deep as expected, this will hurt people, especially the poor, in other ways as well, such as education, indebtedness, and nutrition. It is now a foregone conclusion that the global economy will slip into a recession in 2020. What we don't know is how deep, long, and widespread the contraction in economic activity is going to be. As a result of the unprecedented sudden stop in global economic activity, 2020 is on track to witness the deepest global recession on a scale not seen since World War II. At the World Bank, we are projecting GDP to contract in all developing regions. Even in Asia, the sudden slowdown will feel like a recession. The solution is to simultaneously flatten the pandemic, recession, and financial distress curves. I'm going to cherry pick some of their solutions now to save time. To the greatest extent feasible, which will be different across economies, deep and prolonged recessions must be avoided, for these can cause lasting damage. Long periods of weak supply and demand can lead to elevated structural unemployment, permanently lower capital stock and contained animal spirits. Flattening the recession curve is therefore important. Animal spirits is a phrase coined by Keynes, the economist. Keynes believed that although most of the economic activity results from rational economic motivations, but also economic activity is governed by animal spirit, in other words, emotion. So investors know that emotions play a big role in how the stock market fluctuates. And panic-stricken consumers are not a good ingredient in the recipe that leads to economic revival. The interesting part to me is that these assholes don't actually care about workers. They just want to get the economy back to normal. But what they're saying is that we have to help workers to do it. Their first recommendation is for health and social protection. These are the priority government policies ranging from testing and treatment to hiring new medical staff to expanding social assistance and implementing cash transfers to households. Brookings seems to be the mouthpiece of the World Bank, and the World Bank is saying that we need to implement cash transfers to households. It stands to reason that forgiving student loan debt, forgiving other credit card debt would also help. Deferment of mortgage payments, deferment of rent payments. And all of these are leftist ideas. All of these are policies that the Bernie Sanders movement has been trying to implement. So dear viewers and listeners, are you making the connection between what the World Bank says we need to do and what Bernie Sanders says we need to do? We need to help workers. So our politicians are caught between the anvil and the hammer. They have all their corporate sponsors that don't give a fuck about workers, and at the same time, they need to help workers. And at the moment, the Democrats, the corporate Democrats, aren't doing anything to help workers. They're actually blocking some Republican efforts to help workers. If you're trying to figure out the best response for you as consumers, you as workers, and you as voters, the best response is to elect progressive politicians. And we all may need to get very insistent when it comes to getting those politicians elected. We may even need to take this crippled economy and shut it down altogether and make it absolutely plain that we're not going to have corporate sock puppets representing us in Congress or in the courts. It's obvious to most lefties that we need to reject Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Amy Klobuchar, and the like, but it should be even more clear now that Elizabeth Warren is part of that group.
So yesterday, Elizabeth Warren announced that she was publicly endorsing 20 women running for the Democratic Party in November. Some of them statewide, some of them national, but 20 women endorsements. But it's more important to look who isn't among the 20 than is, because that's the real story here. You'll notice that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is not on the list. Rashida Tlaib is not on the list. Ilhan Omar is not on the list. Pramila Jayapal isn't on the list. And the biggest shocker of all potentially, Ayanna Pressley isn't on the list. All of those women except Pressley, of course, endorsed Bernie Sanders during the Democratic primary process. They backed him, Medicare for All, a Green New Deal. They chose him over Elizabeth Warren. But Pressley, who was part of the squad with AOC, Tlaib, and Omar, broke with those three to endorse Elizabeth Warren. And despite that action, she's still left off this list. And Warren, to be fair, suggested that this isn't the end of her endorsements. She's going to make more endorsements of other people she feels represents the Democratic Party well, and I have no doubt that that's the case. But given that this is her first major rush of endorsements, who she chooses to leave out at this crucial juncture is absolutely telling.
What it tells us is that Elizabeth was never part of the progressive team. And this isn't just sour grapes. We have to know going forward who is on the team and who isn't on the team. All of the Democrats, including Bernie Sanders and AOC, have failed to hold Pelosi and Schumer's feet to the fire when it comes to the CARES Act and the other economic stimulus bills. Nobody has true bona fides right now as a progressive. But for the sake of workers, we need to do the best we can to find the most progressive among these corporate-sponsored Democrats and push them as hard as we can to do what we need to have done. And for those of us who are working to form a third party, we need to make sure that the big money interests don't infiltrate this new party the same way it has the old parties. We need to pay attention to the corporations and who they want and who they don't want. And then we need to work together to make sure to get as many politicians and judges in that they don't want as possible. If you're watching this show, it means you're paying attention to who the corporate politicians are and who they aren't. Stay tuned to this channel going forward to continue to keep abreast of what's going on in progressive politics. And hopefully, the economic requirements and the social requirements of this pandemic will help to elevate some of our progressive heroes. Also, stay tuned for the possibility of a May 1st general strike, and also for the possibility of other mass protests. The DNC is trying to shut down any pageantry surrounding the coronation of their DNC choice for president. But if there is pageantry, I'm going to be looking for any chance that we can disrupt it, and I'll keep you informed about that as well. Don't give up the fight, people. If things weren't already interesting enough, they're about to get even more interesting.